Welcome back to Master Your Glass. With me, Livio Lauro. Today, I was just sifting through the Savoy Cocktail book. I ran into a drink with a really interesting name called the Whizz-Bang. And I have the recipes, so I'm gonna make it. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is, of course, chill my glass. Okay. Now it's funny, the recipe calls for a shake, so I'm going to shake it. I'm not a big fan of shaking dry vermouth, but I'm going to follow the recipe as it goes. Okay, the first ingredient it calls for are 2 dashes of absinthe, which is an interesting measurement. Again, I'm going to use just my bar spoon. 2 dashes are basically the equivalent of 20 drops. Just like that. And then the next thing it calls for are 2 dashes of grenadine. I'm going to use, once again, Liquid Alchemist, which is not red as you would imagine. It's got a different color because it's natural. 2 dashes as well. Okay, next it's going to call for 2 dashes of orange bitters. Now, what is a dash when you're using the bitters bottle? It's a stream, right? Whatever comes out from the stream is going to be considered a dash. So now it calls for 1/3 of French vermouth, which French vermouth is typically dry, and 2/3 of Scotch whiskey. How do we determine what's 1/3 and what's 2/3? It depends on the glass. Because this is a 5-ounce cocktail glass, this recipe is intended to be somewhere between 3 to 3.5 ounces plus the dilution of water. So in order to hit that 3+ category, 1/3 and 2/3 means 2 ounces of Scotch and 1 ounce of the dry vermouth. So let's start with the Scotch. And dry vermouth, or French vermouth. Now the French, the Italians, the Spaniards, the Germans, the Americans, we all make both a sweet and a dry, but back in the day, the French made the dry and the Italians made the sweet. Okay, so these are the ingredients. We're gonna give this a shake. Does not call for garnish, so I guess it's just trying to taste this thing. Oh, that's an interesting cocktail. Well, this is a first on Master Your Glass. I actually do not like this drink. I think the grenadine and the absinthe are way too low in the recipe. I think there's too much Scotch and there's not a lot of balance. It's a glass of confusing Scotch whiskey, meaning a lot of Scotch then buried with some dry vermouth, some absinthe, some grenadine, some orange bitters, and it's just not doing it for me. I probably at this portion would not have shaken it. The recipe calls for being shaken, but if your grenadine is that much, we could have just gotten away with giving this a nice stir and maybe taking advantage of that velvety sexiness of a stirred cocktail. But I still don't think it would have fixed it to the point where I would have recommended to make this drink. So there you have it. I guess this is the first on Master Your Glass. We found an old recipe and it did not work. Maybe I'll do an episode soon where I will do my version of quote unquote fixing it, which would be fun to do as well. That's it. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell so that you can get notified when we do more episodes. If you want to see the tools that I use to make this drink along with our Patreon, I will put all that in the description below, and be sure to come back to Master Your Glass where you get more expert instruction for everyday consumption.